if you want to start from where we were. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Kelly. Thank you to members, both of the public and those on the call this evening, for their forbearance during the time. Hopefully that has now resolved again the issues that we've been having with the YouTube live stream. Before we continue with just hearing the last point of, I think, Councillor Golby's question to Mr. Seckham. As colleagues are aware, the presenter for item number 7 on the future plans for primary care unfortunately does have some other commitments to patients, and given the situation at the moment, I'm very happy that we defer that item. What I would ask is that any notes for presentation be circulated to Kelly, given that it is an important matter, and I'd like to propose that this item come back to us at an extraordinary meeting of this OSP, and that delegated authority be given to the Democratic Services Officer to liaise a date that's convenient. Is there a seconder for that at all, please?
I'll second that, Chair. Councillor Sargent.
Thank you very much. Is there any dissent? No, thank you very much. Well, thank you. Just a brief note. Thank you for getting on with the initial complications, Jenny, getting onto our call eventually, and obviously the further complications on YouTube as we've gone along. Thank you for coming and bearing with us. And yeah, if you could submit those notes to Kelly, and she'll be in touch regards of a future time to come back. So thank you very much. Right, so where we were before the live stream interruptions, I think Councillor Golby had was just partway through, I think, what was the last of her points. Councillor Golby, if you'd like to just to briefly finish up, and then we'll get Mr. Seckham's reply. Councillor Golby.
I can't remember where. So just to recap, the issue that I was talking about was the motorbikes that we are having trouble with, and they don't have registration numbers. So it's difficult for people to be able to identify where they are, who they are, in order for the police to actually go and pay them a visit. And these are possibly the sorts of people who really the police should be visiting. Not to say that they are willingly not. It's just that if people are driving around with on pavements with motorbikes that have no registration numbers, there are multiple issues with that, and they are probably the people who warrant a visit more than others, shall we say. So yeah, it just to try and find a way around that as to how we can work with residents who have eyes and ears all over the place, that we can tap into that and then maybe use that kind of information from the residents to stop these nuisance motorbikes, because they seem to be all over the place, but we are particularly plagued with them in Arbury, and it's not a very pleasant environment when you're walking down in the park with your kids and you've got to dodge somebody whizzing through on one of these mini mopeds. It's not on. So yeah, just that was pretty much all I had to say from there. Thank you, Councillor Golby. Mr. Seckham, did you remember the first parts, or would you like?
I think so. I think there are 3 parts. There's SNTs, 101, and motorbikes, I think. So yeah, Saving Neighbourhood teams are a really important part of the police family. Some forces have abolished them and abolished all their PCSOs. I can promise you that will not be happening in Warwickshire. They do a really important job. They are a problem-solving part of the police, and they're there to work with local councillors, residents and communities to solve problems, and I hope that's what they're doing in your area, Claire. The 101, yeah, I get lots of questions on 101. The performance, believe it or not, is actually improving a bit. Last week, you might be interested, there were 1,427 999 calls and 3,500 101 calls answered by the same call handlers. The average wait time is 1 minute 21, and the target wait time is 1 minute. And I've been ringing up utility companies on behalf of my mother who's moving house, and I have waited considerably longer than a minute and a half for all of them. So not perfect, but we have put more resource into the control room. We're changing the shifts, so there are more people on when it's busier and all those sorts of things. And there's negotiations going on with Unison to do that. So I'm pretty happy that it's improving. But what I would say is, on sort of subdivisions of that, is firstly, not enough people are reporting crimes online. If people report crimes online, that will then free up space for people to get a quicker response on the telephones. So single online home, not enough people, about 10% of our responses on that. I want to see that going way up above that. And secondly, there was the business about Anonymous. We part fund an organisation called Crime Stoppers, which is where you can report crime anonymously, and it goes through to the police and they will prosecute. The problem comes when it comes to court, because in our legal system there has to be a witness who's prepared to give evidence in court if someone is going to be prosecuted. So I accept that, particularly domestic abuse situations, there are those who really don't want to report, but if they don't report, that crime will continue. So we have to give people the confidence to report and encourage them to report a crime. Just on bike cameras, yeah, it's right, it's difficult to get. Certainly from either inside a police car or a dash cam on a civilian, very difficult to get motorbikes. But I have just invested in I think it's 2 speed guns that can be used at an oblique angle and out with our road safety teams, which will take motorbike registration numbers. As you know, they often tend to be going at huge speeds, and these are a really good bit of kit. So it's not easy, but there again, if people see anybody committing a crime and they are a witness to a crime, they must report it, and the force will do everything they can to prosecute offenders.
Thank you very much. Councillor Gassay next.
Oh, yeah, thanks, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Seckham. Just trying to switch the camera on if needed, but can you hear me okay, Chair?
I can hear you fine.
Yes, we can hear you fine.
Perfect. Okay, I'll sort that out when I can. So the main thing I wanted to say, thank you for the mental health cards. Brilliant. It's good to see we've got that in Warwickshire now. I've talked about that with you previously, and obviously my work was quite involved in the mental health car in the West Midlands. Do we have plans, or have we had any input from the ambulance service or the CCGs to fund a paramedic as well to get all 3 services together on the car? And do we have any more plans to roll it out so we've got county-wide cars, whether that's 1 in the north, 1 in the south, and the shared rugby, or 3, or will it be the 1? So that's one part, and obviously the ambulance input would be better for all parties. The road safety with SNTs has been brilliant. Some of the stuff we've had from the SNTs was really good. Local meetings. In your report, Sergeant Steve Croshaw, the award he got in November was really good to see. He's now part of the North SNT, so my area, and it's been really good to have Steve. We've had a lot of changes where we are, with staff leaving and being promoted, so it's good to have someone we recognise that can come along, give reports and tell residents what we've done and what's been going on crime-wise, and that is really good. We've had some really good feedback. Obviously, COVID has stopped all in-person meetings for a long time. I still speak to Steve, so that's good. But it would be nice if we could kind of have some reporting system or some reports that residents can access and to see what's happened, just so we know what's going on our areas. I'll often reach out to Steve on social media or email, and we'll get answers back about what's happening about certain things, but we're not always aware of everything. And the other one is fly tipping. So fly tipping, we've had obviously issues across the borough. It's not just a police issue, it's a council issue, and the council haven't really done enough work to prevent that. I know there needs to be more input from the council, but we've seen some things where we've lost community assets because of antisocial behaviour in a fly tipping spot where a building was set on fire. It could have been prevented. I say again, it's not the police's fault that that's happened, but it would be nice if we could have more work on what we can do to reduce fly tipping. And again, the issues in the same area, whether it's fly tipping, whether it's antisocial behaviour, and that kind of thing. And then finally is the bike team, which have been brilliant. We've had an issue in Gully Common for a long time with bikes coming from all around West Nuneaton, bikes being stolen and set on fire in fields and things like that. And it's good to see the bike team out, but it'd be nice if we could have them out more often, if possible. And just more support really about these bikes. Again, like Claire Golby mentioned, the bikes that aren't registered, they're off-road bikes, and they are hard to deal with. So that'd be helpful if we could have more resources.
Okay, number of points there. Firstly, collaboration, emergency service collaboration. One of the first things I did when I got elected was to set up the Warwickshire Blue Light Collaboration Board. I meet regularly with ambulance, fire and rescue, police and mental health and local authority representatives to see how we can collaborate closer for the benefit of residents. We are in the process of evaluating a scheme whereby we're going to have a series of people or vehicles which will have a fire and rescue and police on them. Sadly, the ambulance have declined to take part. So if there's anything you can do to persuade ambulance to do more, I mean, they are under severe pressure at all times, and certainly at the moment. So we work closely with ambulance, and plainly there are a number of occasions when all three emergency services arrive as an incident. What I am concerned is it is outrageous that paramedics can be attacked by members of our communities, and I'm very keen that they are kept safe when they're doing their important job as paramedics. Safer neighbourhood teams, we encourage all safer neighbourhood teams to do reports. I don't know whether they do in Nuneaton. In my patch, I get a monthly report from my safer neighbourhood team, what's been going on, what crimes have been, who's been apprehended in court, and it's a really useful thing to engage with the public. So let us know if your safer neighbourhood, most of them do, let us know if your safer neighbourhood team doesn't do a monthly or a bi-monthly report. Fly tipping is a scourge of our society. It is a crime. We work very closely with the local authorities, and the bigger ones, and we've had some huge fly tipping incidents, is with the Environment Agency. And I've been able to help in a small way. We had a site down in Earlswood in the south of the county where I've paid for some CCTV cameras, which have acted as a deterrent, and we've had no fly tipping there since they were erected. You've got to make sure they're out of reach of anybody to turn them off or take them away. But fly tipping, we all need to work on fly tipping. We all need to understand why people are fly tipping. Are the local waste and waste operators, are they removing everything they should? Are people putting things in the right bins? But it's down to individual responsibilities at the end of the day, and we have to keep an eye out for that. Yeah, and I'm pleased you've seen the bike team out. They're really good guys. They have off-road capability, and they have brought a number of offenders to justice.
Thank you, Mr. Second. I have two further speakers on this item. Councillor Hancox.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, Chair, if I could make a couple of comments and questions to Mr. Seckham. And thank you for your report and presentation, Mr. Seckham. I just very briefly wanted to go back to the issue that Councillor Golby raised about 101. And I think it's fair to say that probably all of us as councillors over a long period of time have had concerns over the length of time it takes to get through to that. So I'm pleased to hear you say that that's improving, because certainly for myself, and we've had massive problems recently in Bedworth Town Centre in my ward and down the Pine Tree Road area with antisocial behaviour. And I always impress on people to do the 101, but very often people come back and say they give up because of the length of time it's taken to get through. And I have to say, well, if you've got problems with that and you're fearful of anything, then you've got to do the 9s. So we just need assurances that improvement is going to continue to go ahead. And just secondly, Chair, if I may, through to Mr. Seckham again, if I can refer to page 32 of your annual report, and it's in particular, you've already mentioned it, Mr. Seckham, but in relation to domestic abuse / violence, I don't know why we use lots of terminology when really it's all the same. I've had a long-standing concern over this particular issue, and probably more so under the current circumstances where people have kind of been, in close proximity to each other for a lot longer. But at our last meeting, when I asked the question, I've been asking this question in quite a number of places, but at our last meeting, the police response was that there'd been no further increase in domestic violence and abuse, and that it remained stable in our area, when everything points, if you look at anything you see on the television, social media, where it points to an increase nationally in it. So something doesn't quite add up there. I really hope it's the case, but it doesn't quite add up. But I wanted to come on to, I'm sorry if I'm going on, but I wanted to come on to the substantial amount of funding that you've received to address those sort of issues. I'd like to know how that funding has been used up until now. But if I've picked it up right, Mr. Seckham, that funding looks like it's also ending at the end of this month. And bearing in mind the current circumstances don't seem to be going away anytime soon, will there be any extra funding be made available to you think? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hancock. Mr. Seckham.
Yeah, okay. Let me just deal with those in order. The 101, I think I've probably said all I can. I push the Chief Constable every week, but I please encourage those who are able to report online. That frees it up for those who can't operate online to be able to get through much quicker. So that would be my plea to you all if you receive concerns about the 101 number. Yeah, antisocial behaviour, it is a crime. It actually dropped dramatically during COVID, during the lockdown period earlier this year, but it's getting back up to normal levels now, and that's something we need to keep an eye on. That's very much the realm of the Safer Neighbourhood team, to look at the problems caused and by antisocial behaviour, and how other organisations, and this often includes local authorities, housing associations, CCGs, and other sort of public sector to get together and to work out a plan to put that right. Domestic abuse is a huge problem all over the country. You're quite right, Bill. I'm not quite sure which funding you mean. I mean, the Commission Service for Domestic Abuse is going on for 3 to 5 years, so that is not being pulled next month. But what we have done is, I think I mentioned, we've given an emergency grant to most of our beneficiaries, to include women's refuges, victim support, ROSA, and other Safeline and other charities who deal with domestic abuse. And I've given as much money as I've got to it. Unless I have to get more money from the government or put up council tax dramatically, I just don't have a never-ending pot of money. But we put a lot more into these schemes than a lot of other police and crime commissioners have done around the country. DA reporting, domestic abuse reporting, don't believe everything you read, don't believe everything you see, but it's only people who report it that we can measure. So the reporting of domestic abuse has not gone up. I accept that organisations like Refuge are busier as a result of domestic abuse. So, but I can only give you the figure. We can only give the figures that people report. If people don't report it, it goes unnoticed and under the wire and does not get acted on. So there again, do encourage victims of domestic abuse, that includes women and men, to always report a crime. And the funding issue, there's nothing. I don't think there's anything being turned off next month. I'm not sure what you're referring to.
Yes.
Councillor Hancock, did you have a specific sort of page number where you saw that from?
Yeah,
it might help us.
Yeah, it was the page I referred to, page 32.
Page 32 is about road safety.
Well, I'm looking at page 32 in yours.
What page is it on my report?
Okay, it's at the bottom of the column of COVID-19, domestic violence and sexual violence. And it's right at the bottom where it says the emergency funding will be administered through the OPCC to cover the period from the 24th of March to 31st of October 2020. I'm happy for you to have a look at that and get back to me.
Yeah, no, that is right. That is the emergency funding. But we still have possible more funds, but I'll have to be spending some reserve. If organisations put forward a good case to say that they can't operate properly or their service is diminishing, we will do what we can to help. And domestic abuse is right at the top of that pile.
Okay, thank you. Chair, I think in regards to the page number, it's probably our page number on the agenda, right, not the. So okay.
No, it's always difficult when there are two page numbers. Thank you, Councillor Hungleton. Thank you, Philip. I think we've got there with that one. Yeah. I have a hand up from David Patterson. David, was that in relation to that point that we've just discussed that may be helpful to that point?
Yeah, hopefully it will be helpful. I think it's referring to the £218,000 that provided Ministry of Justice for the COVID Relief Fund, which I think is due to finish at the end of this October. But until the MOJ make more money available, then that's the pot, unfortunately.
Thank you. Hopefully that provides us some more further clarity. So thank you there. I have next on the list, I have Councillor Longdon.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for that report, Philip. It's quite a lot of reading. What I couldn't find in there, knife crime seems to be quite prevalent still. Is it still a priority for the police? And will it continue to be a priority? Because I think we've all got concerns about safety in the town, particularly. And can I just mention while I'm on about this, that if IT is interested, but I keep getting a name popping up into my list and dropping out again. It's Sheikh I. Idris, BNH913R, outside of our organisation. I have no idea who that is, but whoever it is keeps popping in and popping out.
I think I can answer that one, Councillor Longdon. That is the independent the independent member of this panel, and I think they must be having some connection problems that mean they need to keep restarting and signing in and out of Teams, and because they're an external person, they do require admission into that. So that hopefully answers that question. Mr. Seckham, in relation to the points about knife crime, thank you.
Yeah, very important point about knife crime. I mean, a lot of it is related to county lines operations and drug dealing and coming from outside of Warwickshire. So interestingly, we had two serious knife crime incidents actually in Leamington. And all the perpetrators and all the victims were not Warwickshire residents, but they were on our patch trying to set up drug dealing operations. So having said that, it makes the local population are not happy, and the fear of crime obviously goes up when there's been a stabbing in the area. I'm absolutely in support of increased stop and searching. I think that is a deterrent to people carrying knives, and we work very closely with other forces around us to stop knives being on people's persons when they are moving either around Warwickshire or into Warwickshire. And actually just yesterday we've had a very successful operation against serious and organised crime groups, with a number of houses being broken into and finding cash, Class A drugs and weapons such as knives in these houses. They have all been confiscated, and those people will be prosecuted. So it's horrific. I think the sad thing is that those carrying knives often think they're doing it out of self-defense, but of course we all know that it isn't. It is an overtly aggressive thing to do, to be carrying a knife for any reason. So we do a lot of work in schools on knife crime and in youth clubs and in youth organisations, and I plainly I would like to see knife crime eliminated, but sadly it goes on, and we all have a responsibility to report anything that anybody sees anybody doing with a knife that is not that is criminal or could be. about to be criminal. I don't know whether, Dave, you've got any more particularly on knife crime to add to the conversation?
Yeah, I mean, I can't give you the stats on it. It's up 14% this year to date, possession of offensive weapons. We do raise it with the force as to a bit of narrative behind that figure. And the increase, I think, has largely been driven by proactive work that the force have been conducting during the COVID period. Acquisitive crime is massively down, or has been massively down, particularly during the early stages of lockdown. Vulnerability offences, including domestic violence, have shown an increase. But it has provided the force with the opportunity to do some proactive work, particularly in county lines and drug offences. So yeah, I think it's a bit of a mixed picture, and it's about the interpretation of the data, which is important. But if you look at drug offences, it's 80% up this year, which it doesn't come to police attention unless they go looking for it. So I think there's a great deal of evidence to suggest that the force have been successful in tackling county lines, drug offences, and by association, knife crime as well.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. I think it's one of those statistics that can look bad, but actually means that there is more engagement in those sorts of crimes if the figures go up, which is what we want to see. We want to see them reduced in total, but what we do want to see is that anyone who is carrying out those sorts of crime is apprehended.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Seckham. And finally on this item, I have Councillor Tandy. Councillor Tandy, please.
Thank you, Chair. Hello, Philip. I think it would be easy to repeat what other people have been saying, and I think we all suffer from similar problems, 101, bikes. But one of the things that I have heard comments from the public about are also relating to crime numbers, saying that maybe the police were reluctant to give them a crime number. And I was listening to a resident the other day who was commenting about, and I don't know what event it was a while ago, from the police saying, well, we don't have the resources to continue, to do that, to continue to do that, or whatever. I am well aware that all organisations are suffering from budget cuts or budget reductions, call it what you may. But I do think that perhaps public comments that that are being made are sometimes not resting easy with the general public. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, June, and good to see you on the screen. Yeah, I mean, crime reporting and crime numbers and confidence in the public, it all sort of goes together. And certainly in my book, if someone is witness or a victim of crime and they report it, it should be absolutely given the number and taken forward. I mean, there is what they call a thrive process, which is of all those 5,000 calls coming in a week, they do have a system of sort of triaging them into the most serious of incidents and those that are not quite so serious. So it's something threatening. Life is plainly goes to the top of the pile. So there are always there's always a sort of pecking order of reported crimes as to how they get dealt with and how quickly they get dealt with. But I think we need to all work closer with the public. The police is the public is the police, to be able to make it more efficient and more effective. And certainly my job is to make Warwickshire safer. And part of that is the force responds promptly and properly to any information that they're given. And yeah, it's not perfect. I would suggest it's improving with the extra numbers that we've got and the better communications that we now have and the better equipment. Body-worn video has been a really good tool. And I signed that off. One of the first things I did was to sign it. Every officer out in the public, including PCSOs and specials, now has a body-worn video, and that can provide really good evidence and actually protects the officer and it protects the person that they may be engaging with as well, because it records evidence. So I'd like to build the confidence in the police, to build the rapport and the conversation between the community and the police so that they can react quicker and better and more efficiently. And if that's the last question, Chair, can I just say that's been a really interesting evening for me. I've learned quite a lot. My job is to listen, not to talk, really, and I've listened to what everybody's had to say and taken notes. And I'll look forward to attending another session of your Scrutiny Committee when invited to do so.
It's not quite over yet, Philip, I'm afraid.
Okay.
I've just got a couple of questions, comments myself, just to wrap us up. I think if I can, on behalf of all of us, if you could pass on your thanks to all of the officers for their hard work and dedication during these very trying times of COVID-19. I think they've been asked to do an awful lot overnight with a number of pieces of new legislation, fixed penalty notices for a number of offences that I don't think any of them or us thought they or we would see in our lifetime for some of those types of offences. So their dedication is very to be noted, and I think thanks to pass on to them. My question, I have sort of two question parts. The first being forensics. You said that's now shared with West Midlands. Was one of the only sort of, the other services I'd say are very much backroom services, but that's one of the only sort of big front, I would sort of front service that you share with West Midlands Police. My question would be in relation to that: how are those calls assigned and prioritised? I know we've seen in the past, not in Warwickshire, but other forces have said, for example, they've tried on house burglaries, they would only do forensics on one side of the road, not the other. And if that is a shared service with West Midlands, for example, how is it prioritised on what those what offences those forensic officers would go to? And is there any sort of split to guarantee that Warwickshire, as a much smaller force than the West Midlands, would certainly be getting those forensic officers out to calls where we need them? My second part of the question is in relation to the police numbers. Firstly, congratulations to you on that. I know you've pushed very hard for those new officers, and the staggering number that we've got, 250 new officers in 2 years, is an absolute fantastic achievement, and very well done for that. I would ask the question of how those numbers of officers are split between the additional officers, which obviously were promised by virtue of the additional precept funding, and how we are measuring up with new officers through the government's additional funding for an additional for 20,000 new police officers. So really, it's sort of, we've got that 250, and with the additional government funding and the additional funding from the precept, are we expecting that to go further, or have we done better than most forces, and have we managed to upfront those extra government officers, as it were, so that they're ready and on the front line now? So it's just those two from me, if that's possible, please, Philip.
Okay, thanks. Forensics, we are currently still doing it with West Mercia on the old alliance basis, and I'm just about to sign the collaboration agreement to start to share with West Midlands as from April 2021. So that's in the future. I mean, the reason why we just can't afford to set this up on our own. I mean, DNA testing, fingerprint, digital forensics, and mobiles and everything else. It's a highly specialised and expensive thing to do, and we need to share with somebody. Yeah, we will still have our own forensics officers in Warwickshire. It's really the expensive equipment and kit testing ability that will be shared. But we will still have our forensics officers who will take that decision locally as to what to examine in further depth or what not to. So if that gives you some confidence that there will, of course, be a Warwickshire input and influence on that forensic policy. Officers, you might be interested, of the 250 extra we've got, 41 come from the national pool, and we've recruited over 200 out of precept monies. So I prioritise that. We've obviously had to spend other money in staff to support those officers, but we've absolutely prioritised frontline officers in that. And so we out of the 20,000 so far, Warwickshire has got 41. I think it was 14 one year and 27 the next year. The third year, we're waiting for our allocation. We're expecting between another 50 and 100. So I would hope that within 18 months, Warwickshire Police will be over 1,100 officers. I'd like to get it up to 1,200, but that will just depend on how much funding we get and how much I dare or am prepared to ask Warwickshire taxpayers to pay in council tax. If you want my view on that, I think we've given them two pretty high whacks over the last 2 years. With the COVID and the situation for a lot of people about their employment an ability to pay mortgages and even feed their children, I'll be looking for as low a figure as we can possibly do on council tax.
Can I just thank you for attending tonight? Thank you for those comments, and also thank you for recognising the financial implications upon all of our residents. And I know that is a very difficult time for many. So your comments to keep that council tax increase as low as possible is certainly going to be very welcome news for many of them. So thank you for that. In which case, to wrap this item up, I'd like to propose that the report from the Warwickshire Police and Crime Commissioner be noted. Is that seconded, please? Seconded, Councillor Evans. Thank you very much. Is there any against us noting that report?
Would you excuse me, Mr. Chairman? I've got one or two other things to do.
Yeah, very happy if you and yourself and David need to leave now. That is no problem. Thank you both very much for your time. It's been very greatly appreciated, and thank you for your forbearance with our technological issues as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
So, as discussed before, agenda item 7 will be going to a special meeting following the motion there, which brings us on to agenda item number 8, which is the Health and Wellbeing Board annual report. Joanne McKinnon, please.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, everyone. My name is Gemma McKinnon, and I'm the new Health and Wellbeing Delivery Manager for Warwickshire, and I started in post at the start of September. So under normal circumstances, I would be presenting on the Health and Wellbeing Board annual review today. But because of resource being directed into the COVID response over the past few months, this review's been delayed. So I'm here today to outline the progress on the new health and wellbeing strategy for 2020 to 2025 and the consultation plan and timeframe around that, if that's okay, Chair.
That is absolutely fine. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So the strategy sets out the commitments and vision for improving health and wellbeing for Warwickshire residents, and the approach that the strategy has taken was endorsed by the Health and Wellbeing Board in January. So this includes 3 strategic outcomes. And they are a continuation of the ambitions from the previous strategy. So it's around ensuring that people will lead a healthy life, people will be part of a strong community, and people will experience effective and sustainable services. So to address these within this strategy, we're proposing that we focus within the first 2 years on 2 priority areas, and those priority areas have been identified within the joint strategic needs assessment findings, and also they were then reviewed and agreed at some senior leaders workshops that took place late last year. So those priority areas are around children having the best start in life, children and young people having the best start in life, and helping everybody to improve their mental health and well-being. And a golden thread through both of them really is health inequalities. So the impact of COVID-19 has kind of solidified those as priorities, really. And you know, even though the world has moved on, I think that we're all in agreement that those are still sort of key priorities. But there are, of course, new pieces of information and findings post-COVID that we still need to consider and that we still want to work into the strategy, which is what we're doing at the moment before we put it out for public consultation. So some of those key documents are the County Council's recovery plan, the action plans from the COVID Local Government Advisory Board, and also the Health and Care Partnerships reset and recovery plans. And then there's also key new data that we need to make sure that we're factoring in from the health impact assessment, which was completed and published in over the past few months, and also the COVID-19 resident survey, which closed on the 30th of September. So there's a few pieces of information and findings from that we want to make sure that we're reviewing and feeding through to the strategy. To make sure that we've got these priorities right and to help us shape the strategy, we'll be going out for public consultation for a 5-week period, and that will be running from the middle of November. And the ways that we're proposing to engage with the public include an online questionnaire, which at the moment is being reviewed again to make sure that we've strengthened it with some of those, the findings that we might have had from COVID, through virtual engagement sessions. And we've started to speak with key groups to try and arrange them. So we've spoken with some faith groups at the moment, with EQUIP, the Equalities and Inclusion Partnership, and also with Pride, just to make sure that we're engaging with some of those key groups. And then also through the delivery of any presentations, if there's any sort of key groups that we can attend and try to raise awareness of the consultation and increase the reach of it. As part of the COVID-19 test and trace team, there's also a community engagement group that was set up as part of that, who have been working really hard to get those messages out to key groups. And so we want to try and use that network that's been built up through that group to, again, put this message out and get people responding to the consultation. So the targeted engagement with key groups has been identified through an equality impact assessment. There is an equality impact assessment tool which has been developed from some of the findings from the health impact assessment, and we're just updating that as well. But there's we want to make sure that we've just included any of those key groups that have been identified through the pandemic as experiencing the largest inequality, and also just trying to factor in any changes to the consultation approach that we're having to make in light of current social distancing guidelines and measures. So, as I say, we're aiming to take the consultation, put the consultation out at the middle of November for a 5-week period, and then we're aiming to take the strategy to the Health and Wellbeing Board to March for sign off there. So thanks for listening to that, and any questions welcome, and apologies again for not being able to provide a more detailed report at this time.
Thank you very much for that, Gemma. We have one public speaker on this item. I'm going to bring in now Mrs. Kondaka. As you know, you have 3 minutes, so thank you.
Yeah, I won't need anything like 3 minutes, because I think Gemma's actually covered quite a lot of what I was going to say anyway. I think it's just trying to work with the trusts and what have you, because mental health has, and mental ill health has gone way up the agenda with COVID. I saw some awful figures, quoted in the Health Service Journal, today from Birmingham and Solihull Trust about the numbers, waiting for inpatient beds and things. So, I mean, these are serious issues. I don't know, what the figures are in Coventry, but I can only guess that, Coventry and Warwickshire, but I can only guess that they will be, have gone up, similarly. So it's just putting that, and healthy lifestyles. I mean, that is a constant message. And obviously with COVID, a lot of people are aware of having put on weight. I mean, I'm the heaviest I've ever been in my life, even though I have kept exercising and things. So, people's lifestyles have changed, and so, but you've obviously well aware of those, and covered that anyway in your presentation. So, thank you.
Thanks, Michelle.
Thank you, Ms. Kondaka. Anything to address at this moment, Gemma?
I think just agreeing with Ms. Kondaka, really, just about the mental health, and that's something that we're making sure that for both of those two priorities on children and young people and mental health, that we've got identified leads, and that we'll be developing action plans over the next few weeks and months, basically, so that we can make sure we're driving those two priorities forward. And then there will be an annual report into the Health and Wellbeing Board on how we are addressing each of those priorities.
Thank you very much. So to enable debate, can I move that the report be noted? Is that seconded?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Councillor Llewellyn-Nash. In fact, Councillor Llewellyn-Nash, you are my first speaker. So, Councillor Llewellyn-Nash.
Yeah, thank you, Gemma, for this really great report. And I suppose really COVID-19 has thrown up quite a lot of sort of anomalies and things we can't really see ahead. Just for instance, we can't put numbers on how many people are going to be affected with mental health and the effects of COVID-19. So I presume, you know, although you've got a strategy, no doubt in the next couple of months, this might have to be sort of revisited, rewritten, because we don't know what the effects are going to be after, do we? You know, especially with mental health. I work in the private sector and we're doing a lot of work for the NHS, for instance. So, you know, they are sort of almost becoming years behind with their sort of plans that they had to do. So, although there is this health and wellbeing executive group, I would imagine that this is going to be one of those documents that will change over time and your priorities will change as well. Would that be the case? Because we don't know what even sort of 6 months is going to look like, let alone sort of plan a year or 18 months ahead.
Yeah, thank you. So we've one of the reasons why we've got those, although it's a 5-year strategy, we've said that we'll focus on those 2 priorities for the first 2 years, but that we will review them annually. And I agree with you that I think we need to do that at the moment because we don't know how things are going to change. I think in terms of sort of delivering on those priorities, and say, for example, you know, within Nuneaton and Bedworth and the North Place, there will be the Health and Wellbeing Partnership will have a pivotal role to play in that, and I see them as being instrumental in sort of leading on the delivery of the strategy, and so they will be constantly reviewing their action plans and making sure that they are meeting the needs of the local population, and that it's being reviewed, you know, probably on a quarterly basis. We'll report into the health and wellbeing boards, and I hope that with those you know, children and young people and mental health is such a broad area anyway, that it's likely that there might be different, you know, a certain mental health priority for 6 months, and then perhaps it might change to a wellbeing priority, or, you know, hopefully it still allows some flexibility for there to be some movement within those 2 priorities.
Thank you very much for that, and thank you, Councillor Nash, for that question. Councillor Longdon.
Thank you, Chair. Hi, Gemma.
Hi.
Well, welcome to the Lion's Den. As a strategy, it's not really developed much, has it? It's a follow-on from the previous strategy, and I'm not exactly sure where Coventry is sitting in all of this as well, because it was a joint strategy at one point. And there are issues in here. Page 2 of 4 of your document, 2.3, where it says people from communities with good education and good jobs tend to live over 7 years longer for men and 5 years longer for women. Now that's a statistic that's been around since the mid-90s and probably longer, and it's not moved. And when the JSNA came out, it was always said that either if the JSNA doesn't sort this problem, then the whole thing's going to fall into disrepute. And I haven't seen any evidence as yet where there's been any proposals or any movement towards sorting things out for this disparity between the north and the south of the county, because that's that's the measurement it used to be. I've just dropped my spec, excuse me. That's the measurement it used to be, and now it's changed to people with good education and etc. But it's just north and south, basically. It's just the phraseology's changed. And unless that's sorted, then I don't see how we can actually maintain any sort of credibility with the JSNA and the health and wellbeing strategy going on. And the other thing that jumped out of the pages on me was on 3 or 4, help our children and young people to have the best start in life. Very laudable. And yet, at one of these meetings, it was admitted that children needing assessment have now gone out to over 96 weeks waiting for an assessment. And that was an increase. It wasn't coming down. So the whole thing, if it's a strategy, what's it a strategy of, and what does it tend to do? I appreciate you only just got here, so you can't answer these questions, but I mean, questions need to be asked of the board, exactly what they're going to be doing in terms of those 2 particular items that I'm interested in.
Thank you, Councillor Longdon. Gemma, if those are in your area and you have some ability to answer, that would be very helpful. Understand if it's not your own, just be grateful for that clarification if it's not. So, Gemma, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, just to start with on the it being a joint report with Coventry. So there's the overarching joint health and wellbeing board concordat, and we're aligning the strategy to that. And we've also I know Coventry released theirs at the end of last year, but we've been working with them to make sure that ours does align with their strategy. In terms of the healthy life expectancy and that not moving, I think it's a really difficult one, because I suppose it's something that does take a long time to change. It's one of those sort of long-term indicators, and I don't want that to sound like it's a bit of a cop-out with it. But I hope that by having those particular focuses on each place and having the partnerships now, that it might be it might help us to try and resolve some of those issues, because it might mean that we can make sure that we're focusing the right attention or the right services in the right area through sort of place-based commissioning. The children waiting for assessment, I'll pick that up next week when I meet with Kate Sahota and Paula Mawson, who'll be leading on some of these pieces of work with me, and I can take the other questions back to the board as well, Councillor Longdon.
That would be great. And if you could liaise with Kelly so she can circulate the responses to those, that would be most helpful. So thank you very much for that, Gemma, and taking away those that aren't your direct areas. So it's been proposed and seconded that we note the report. Is there any dissent? Councillor Longdon, you have your hand up again?
Yes, Chair. I don't like the way that you're interpreting what I said. It is part of Gemma's response because it's in her report. It is part of her responsibility, because I read the words straight out of the pages, so it is part and parcel of that. It is the strategy, and Gemma's working on that. So I don't like your interpretation that you're putting on it, and I like that recorded.
Councillor Longdon, Gemma has said that it's not something that she has the statistics for now, that there are more appropriate people for that to be dealt with, that she will pass that back to the relevant members of the board and will ensure that a response is communicated to us via Kelly. I'm not quite sure what it is further that is expected at this moment in time. Are there any further
I'm not expecting
questions?
anything, Chair. I'm just saying your interpretation was incorrect.
I'm not going to get into an argument with you, Councillor Longdon. Is there any further comments from anybody else? No, thank you. Well, thank you very much, Gemma, for coming before us tonight, and thank you very much for your forbearance again as well with the technological and streaming issues before. So thank you very much. It's most appreciated.
Thank you, Chair.
That then brings us on to agenda item number 9, which is the Changing Places Toilet Working Group briefing note. Now, Kelly, is there anybody to physically present this this evening?
There isn't, Chair.
There isn't.
I did speak to the officer who sent it me, and he seemed to indicate that it was agreed that the briefing note would be satisfactory. But if there is any questions, I can take it back to him. So,
thank you.
And perhaps putting some changing places in existing buildings, but it would be an expensive thing to do without that extra funding. But I do support the point you made, and I would like to see a report brought back to this committee at some point, Chair.
Thanks very much for those comments, Councillor Tandy. I mean, yes, and this possibly speculation. I would hope that the use of the sort of the likeliness is therefore is the case of, well, it would be dependent upon, you know, potential changes to the regulations in 2020. I would also note, quite interestingly, it says there's £30 million of funding to be distributed. The report sort of recommends that it's around £15,000 per facility, which, you know, if you did the maths there, would give us 2,000 projects across the country. So hopefully that would stand us certainly in very good stead. I have Councillor Golby indicating to speak. Councillor Golby, please. Councillor Golby, you're muted.
I'd like to take this a step further. I don't think we should be waiting for maze and possibilities. I think we should actually be looking to implement policy ourselves. And to do that, I think I'd like to offer an amendment to what's in front of us at the moment. So we note the report, but we also then make a recommendation to council, and I've just jotted some words. So the motion that I would recommend going to council would be that this council will proactively enable changing places facilities within our borough, and that this council commits to include changing places facilities in all new council buildings and leisure facilities. This council will also review and resource the retrofitting of changing places facilities into all our public buildings over the next 10 years. And this council will require all applications for new buildings open to the public to install changing places facilities instead of a basic disabled toilet. I think we should be on the front foot with this. I think 10 years is a reasonable amount of time to be able to look at retrofitting projects within our public buildings. And if I can offer some background to this, some basic research that I undertook, it took me a couple of minutes. According to the Nuneaton and Bedworth Equality and Diversity Profile of 2016, approximately 10% of our borough describe themselves as disabled to the extent that their day-to-day activities are limited. That's 10% of our borough. And then a further 10% say that their day-to-day activities are limited a little by disabilities. It's startlingly obvious to me that we need to do something on this. I've been an advocate for this for a while. I'm pleased that we got some traction with Warwickshire County Council in their new public building that is going to have a change in places facilities. But for a town as big as well, for a borough, not just a town, for the whole borough as big as we are, we don't have one. So one is one, but we should look to make sure that we future-proof this for our residents, because there is, at least 10% of our residents can't use the bathrooms when they come into our town centres. Not only is that disgraceful on our part, but it's also meaning that a significant amount of spend is going elsewhere. And if we want people to come into our town centres, we have to be able to provide the facilities for them. So I would hope that this actually gets seconded, and I would hope that we do send this as a recommendation, as a motion, should I say, to be discussed at the next full council.
I'll second that, Chair.
Was that Councillor Sargent?
It is, yes.
Thank you, Councillor Sargent. So we have, can I ask Councillor Golby if she could please post her amendment into the chat for us all to see, as well. I have so far 2 speakers then upon an amendment thereof. Come first to Councillor Tandy.
Thank you, Chair. I sympathise with all of the comments that Councillor Golby has said. I cannot support her proposal because we have absolutely no idea what that proposal will cost, either now or in the future. We are all in dire circumstances, businesses, ourselves. We're all having major problems with funding and budgets. I agree with the sentiments of Councillor Golby, but until I have seen the cost of what she is suggesting, I can't support it, Chair. I would continue to support the proposal that you made in the first instance, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Tandy, for your comments there. I have Councillor Evans on the list next. Councillor Evans.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I absolutely support the amendment in the name of Councillor Golby, and she has been an advocate for this issue for many years. We're both members of the Changing Places Working Party, and I know just how passionate Councillor Golby is about this issue, and I believe it's actually a friend of hers who originally made her aware of this situation. From my own perspective as a councillor in Bedworth, having looked at the Changing Places Association website, the nearest Changing Place toilet for residents in Bedworth is actually at Corley Services. And going forward, I think it should be an absolute priority for the council to ensure that some of our disabled residents have access to Changing Places toilets. And I think it would be fantastic for us to have one in Bedworth Town Centre, and we should very much look towards using some of our buildings, the museum, our leisure centres, the Civic Hall, to installing these toilets in. In relation to the point made by Councillor Tandy about the financial implications, well, that's the whole point of putting this forward to full council, because inevitably it will be the responsibility of an officer to ensure that a report is presented alongside Councillor Golby's motion. So if there are any concerns around financial implications, then I'm sure an officer will raise those at a meeting of full council. So I very much will be supporting this amendment. I think it needs to go to full council for further discussion, and I very much hope that this motion tonight gets cross-party support. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Evans. I've got just another hand go up. I've actually got 3 hands up, 2 of which are new speakers, and I've also got Councillor Golby as well. I'm going to go first of whether that's a hands up from her previous one or not. She can hopefully clarify in the next few moments by taking it down or leaving it up. I'm going to go to the first new speaker I have on the list, and that's Councillor Hancox.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Look, I don't think it's something we should get into too much of an argument about. I think we all, cross-party wise, support the principle of this. The point I was making was we need to make sure that it's going in as a firm document within our policy, planning policy stuff. But you didn't want to take that forward, Chair. But I think we are supportive of the principles of it. The problem I've got, and I'm trying not to repeat what Councillor Tandy has said, is we can't just amend the budget type things ad hoc through what is a scrutiny panel. And that's why I was asking that it went through to the planning policy and cabinet. Now, if you want to include it as part of the budget, we've got the budget setting for this council not too far away. and I would suggest, Chair, that is the method to do it. Is, you know, when you're setting your budgets, is to include it in that. Not to, I don't see the need to take it to a full council meeting for that. It can be part of the budget setting process. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Hancock. I took your comment before, Councillor Hancock, to be a comment and a question back to the officer as to whether they had raised this with the planning policy team, rather than that be that you were looking to move some sort of motion or amendment. So if that wasn't the case, apologies, but if you wish to move that as such, then once we have disposed of either way this particular motion that we're discussing, I'm very happy to bring you back in at that point if you did want to raise that as a amendment to whatever we may have then on the table at that point. Councillor, next new speaker I have is Councillor Longdon.
Thank you, Chair. The first sentence of the motion isn't too bad, because it's on about including changes places in all new council buildings and leisure facilities. That's okay, because they're being built, so you can make provision in that respect. Where a depart is on the council will also review the resource of retrofitting of changing places facilities in all our public buildings. Well, the first thing that comes to mind is the museum. It's not exactly a place where you could easily fit a changing places toilet in, not without making substantial changes to it, and that's probably extensions or something like that. So I don't see that that's very practical in terms of doing that. And also in that final bit it says all applications for new build open to the public to install changing place facilities. We could make that a policy, I suppose, but we wouldn't be able to enforce that through the planning regime, because if applicants decided not to, I don't think there's a lot we could do about it. And if you refuse the application, then they would probably appeal and say it's unreasonable, and it would go through the Minister or Secretary of State, who would probably agree with them. So there's a lot. The first sentence not too bad, but the rest of it I think is a bit over the top and not workable. Certainly isn't pragmatic or practical, and that needs to either go, or the whole thing I would not agree with. Sorry about that, but no, I would not agree with. I agree with the principles, but I don't agree with what's being tried on here.
Thank you very much for that, your comments, Councillor Longdon. So I have Councillor Golby who wishes to speak again, but I'm just going to make some of my comments now as my first speech. I would probably agree with this motion put forward by Councillor Golby. I think it's very welcome. I would suggest respectfully that some of the points raised by others are things that should well come as part of a consideration at full council. And I certainly think that, you know, it would be obviously if this was a planning policy as discussed previously of the new builds facilities and of the type mentioned in the motion should have disabled change in place in toilets in lieu of traditional disabled toilets, then obviously that would be one for the committee to decide on each application as it comes forward, and it would be given the same weight that all policies of planning policies of this council do have. And obviously it would be for committee to look at and to weigh up the individual application in front of them based on its particular merits and demerits. And I think that would be something that would be done by them at that sort of point. So in the round, I do support the motion by Councillor Golby. I think it is a very interesting one. I think that it's something that should be debated and viewed further by council. So at the moment, I have 3 hands up who are speakers from whom we have heard before. I'll take those in the order in which their hands were raised. That's Councillor Golby.
Thank you, Chair. Just to pick up on a few points, there is no cost involved in sending a motion to full council in that respect. I'm not asking for the immediate onset of building, changing places. What I'm saying is that we should actually bring this to full council and discuss the issue, because for 10% of our residents, it's a very, very serious issue. And to say that I feel it's being diminished slightly. Now, I have to justify this to people who have, for example, people that there's a family that's been in contact with me, but not to give too much away. They have twin daughters who are of teenage years and have cerebral palsy, and they have to physically change their daughters. I mean, imagine teenagers. So it's just not dignified. But they have to do that on the floor of disabled toilets, which, quite frankly, I have trouble standing on the floors of some disabled toilets, let alone lying a teenager down in order to change them. Any one of us could end up needing these facilities. You could have a stroke and not be able to go to the bathroom yourself. You could have a car crash and not be able to go to the bathroom yourself. Every time you step foot outside of your front door, this potentially could be something that you will need. And we haven't got it. And there is no harm in looking at it. I mean, my motion has given a 10-year timescale. It's not an unachievable thing. For the public buildings, I do hope that it actually is mandatory for public buildings to have these things in. They should have them in anyway. I think policy-wise, policy is policy. You can implement policy, or you can choose to not implement policy. That is a decision for the committee. But the suggestion I've made is that changing places facilities instead of disabled toilets. So where you would hope that a builder would be putting in a disabled facility, if, for example, you're looking at a commercial premises, so you know, someone that has customers like a cafe or something like that, if that's a new build, they are wise to do that anyway, because that will then attract more business. So if you can cater for an audience that is not catered for at all, that audience will come to you. In the whole of the town, that audience will come to you. So it's actually commercially viable for people to look at that, and putting policy in place just gives the impetus that we are on the front foot with this. We are supporting residents with this, and I don't think it's a bad thing for us to actually review what we've got and where we've got it. And again, it's a review. It's not an absolute commitment that we will put a changing places toilet in every single building we own. It's a review. What's wrong with that? What's wrong with a review? And yes, okay, I take your point on the museum, but what's wrong with having a look and seeing if we can come up with a way of doing it? What's wrong with that? And yes, there'll be a minimal cost, but we're not talking millions of pounds here. We're talking about actually providing a service for our residents that they currently don't have. And it's potentially, like I say, we're all one bad accident away from needing these facilities ourselves. And if I have to take, you know, somebody to call these services in order for them to have the decency of having a bathroom experience that's not absolutely disgusting or in the back of a car, then there's something wrong with that in this day and age. And I would ask everybody to send this to full council, and we can have that debate. And if you don't want to do this, or if you think there are other ways of doing this, or if the financial viability is not there, then fine. But we need to look at it before we just write it off. And I will advocate for these facilities in as many places as I can get them for as long as I have got the ability to speak on this. So thanks for that.
Thank you, Councillor Golby. Very, very enlightening. I have two further hands up here, both of whom are individuals that have spoken before. I propose that we will be hearing from those two, and then we will look to vote on this particular matter and sort of go from there. Next on the list is Councillor Hancock's.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think it's unfortunate if we're going to end up being confrontational about this, because I think we're all agreed on the principle of it. I think the points were made about at what point and what the budget responsibilities are. But I wanted to point out, and it's really important, is that the planning committee doesn't set policy. It's there to see how it applies it at the planning application stage. And Chair, it's really important that this does move along, because we've got lots of opportunity to start doing this, which would be good. If you look at the opportunities we've got now, we're meant to be going ahead with a new build Bedworth Leisure Centre, and you know that's an ideal opportunity to make sure this type of facility is included in a building like that. We've got all of the transforming Nuneaton stuff and any developments that are coming along with that, and so again it's a real opportunity, and I don't see a problem where you've got a substantial planning application, is that it should be part of our policy to implement it there. I think we're on the right lines, Chair, but there's that sticking point about the budget thing. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hancock, for your comments. Finally on this one, Councillor Tandy.
Sorry.
Councillor, there we go. We can hear you now. Thank you, Councillor Tandy.
Yeah, sorry about that. I still haven't changed my view, Chair, and I cannot support this proposal. And I would ask members to have a look at what has actually been moved. Yes, it's about it going to council, but it says, and Councillor Golby talks at length about she wants us to review it, but her actual proposal says that this council commits to include changing places facilities in all new council buildings and leisure facilities. We may not be able to do that unless the legislation says it has to be done. This council will also review and resource the retrofitting of changing places facilities to all our public buildings over the next 10 years. So it isn't just about review, Chair, it's about reviewing and resourcing. So, you know, let's be honest about what is actually in the proposal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Tandy. I have on the chat a point of order from Councillor Evans. Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Chairman. In accordance with the council's constitution, could I request that the vote that we're about to have on Councillor Golby's amendment be a recorded vote, so people can see in the minutes how people vote, please?
Thank you, Councillor Evans, for that request, and that has been noted. Okay, so we will then move to the vote on this item. I will, given that there has been dissent and that it's been asked for a recorded vote, I will ask the officer to read the roll of names so that councillors can indicate either for, against or abstention on this matter. Thank you.
Yes, pardon me, sorry, yes, Chair. So if you could just indicate as I call your name whether you are for or against the motion. Councillor Dougherty.
Against.
Councillor Evans.
For.
Councillor Glass.
Against.
Councillor Gazane. Councillor Gazane. I'll come back to you at the end. Councillor Golby.
For.
Councillor Hancock's.
Against.
Councillor Hocking.
Against.
Councillor Llewellyn Nash.
Sorry, just turning the microphone on. 4.
Councillor Longdon.
Against.
Councillor Pandir.
4.
Councillor Rudkin.
Against.
Councillor Sargent, Jane Sargent.
4.
Councillor Tandy.
Against.
Councillor Walmsley.
4.
And Councillor Gizane. Councillor Gizane, are you still here? Councillor Gizane, you are muted. Chair, it doesn't seem that Councillor Gizane is able to respond. Currently, the vote is 7 against, 6 for.
Chair.
Thank you for that information, Kelly. Kyle, I'm going to try and raise Councillor Gizane in the chat in case it is that he's having any technical issues. Kyle, you indicated, did you have a point? Did you say you had a point of order, Kyle?
Yes, I do, Chair. There was a precedent set at the Audit and Standards Committee some months ago that if a councillor has technical difficulties, we actually adjourn the meeting to try and contact that councillor to try and get them back onto the call in order for them to vote. And I think it's only right that Councillor Gizane is given the right to vote on this amendment if he wishes. Clearly there must be some sort of technical difficulties. So could I ask that actually we adjourn until we receive Councillor Gizane's vote?
Thank you for that, Councillor Evans, and thank you also for noting the precedent set previously. I am happy to take a 5-minute adjournment. Kelly, could you potentially try and reach Councillor Gizane, please, just to establish if there are any problems in that time? And if I could ask that the live stream be paused at this stage, please.
Yes, I'll try and see if I can contact him, Chair.
Most appreciated. Thank you. So it's 19:28 now. We're going to take 5 minutes to try and get Councillor Gizane. Thank you.
I'll let you know once it's live.
Thank you.
It's now live, Chair.
Thank you very much for that. Thank you for your forbearance, everybody. Have we managed to reach Councillor Ghislaine?
No, Chair, I've tried calling him on all of the numbers that I have for him, but I can't seem to get through. It either goes through to answer machine or it seems to be engaged.
Okay. I was just taking the time to try and re-go through my online protocols to establish where we were in this instance. I'm just getting to the relevant section now. Thank you for your forbearance, in which case we have, I believe, made good attempt. I will make one last. Councillor Ghislaine, are you there and able to cast your vote, please? No, I don't think we are. In which case, we have obviously given councillors the opportunity. We have attempted to reach the councillor and not been able to do so. On that basis, that motion is lost. So we are now back to noting the report. Are there any further comments or anything that any person wishes to move from here? No, I see no dissent. In which case, the proposal is that the report be noted. Is there any dissent to that? Subject to the questions and the comments that have been raised tonight being circulated to the officer and brought back to the committee, the responses to all of those. So subject to that, is there any dissent to the report being noted? I see no dissent, so the report is noted and the comments and requests made for information to be responded to by the officer and brought back to us in due course. Thank you. Next is item 10 on our agenda, which is the forward plan. Are there any comments on that? No, in which case, can I move that item be noted? Is that seconded?
Seconded.
Thank you. I saw Councillor Hancock's hand. Was that to speak on this, Councillor Hancock's?
No, I was just seconding it, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hancock's. Any comments from any member? No. Any dissent? No, in which case item 10, the forward plan, is noted. Item 11, the revised work programme. I should note here that those eagle-eyed amongst us will note that we should have had a report from the JSNA Public Health update at this meeting. Our officer has been chasing this to try and get some sort of correspondence from them in time for the meeting today, and unfortunately had been unable to do so, and therefore this item is something that, obviously subject to us getting those reports and the etc., will be coming at our next meeting in December instead. So that's just a point that I've been informed of today to make all members aware. So propose that the revised work programme be agreed. Is that seconded?
Seconded.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. Any comments? Any dissent? No, that item therefore be agreed. Finally, item 12, any other items? There is nothing else further from me, you will be glad to hear. So that is the end of the meeting. Thank you all very much for your attendance, and thank you to the public, and thank you to everyone to your forbearance with our issues with the live streaming this evening. This information is for our IT team. The meeting has now ceased. Please end the recording.